Hey, this is Evan Marc Katz, dating coach for smart, strong, successful women, your personal trainer for love. Thank you for joining me on today's Love You podcast. We got a really special treat today. I do not interview people that often, generally like to hear the sound of my own voice, but I have had the good fortune of learning about a couple that gives amazing advice for couples. And as we were talking about prior to airing, dating is what leads to relationships. Relationships are what lead to marriage. And it's really important to know how to manage that relationship, especially if you're in a long-term one. And I always like to defer to people who are experts. So today's guests are Tarah and EJ Kerwin. Tarah and EJ Kerwin are relationship experts and the founders of Relationship Renovation, a dedicated therapy practice in Tucson committed to helping couples strengthen and transform their relationships. Their flagship venture, the Relationship Renovation Counseling Center, offers therapy grounded in a unique model that emphasizes intentional communication and empathy. With the launch of the Relationship Renovation at Home program, they've expanded their reach, providing couples nationwide and globally with structured support to foster relationship growth. We say relationships so many times. Since 2019, they've co-hosted the highly regarded Relationship Renovation Podcast, tackling common relationship challenges with empathy and actionable insights. In 2024, they expanded their impact by launching the Relationship Renovation YouTube channel, furthering supporting of their couples on their journey to healthier, more fulfilling connections. It was a word salad, but all very important. We are emphasizing healthy relationships. So thank you guys for joining me on my podcast. I'm looking forward to a great conversation with you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Evan.
My pleasure entirely. So I think from where I sit, there's always like a Venn diagram in relationships. And it doesn't have to be gendered, but if it's a heterosexual couple, the man wants X, the woman wants Y.
Yeah.
The more they could find overlap between their wants and needs, the happier the relationship, but there's often a disconnect between their respective needs. How do you guys help people come together and find that point in the Venn diagram where they can find agreement instead of conflict?
Well, I mean, we generally see people at the point where it's broken down, and so you mentioned like sort of in our introduction, empathy. And I think that that's a big rebuild for us at the very beginning of working with a couple, because by the time they've gotten to us, their competing needs, the kind of the two circles where the Venn diagram hasn't overlapped yet, feel like everything is oppositional, right? And that the other person is somehow denying, or the other person is antagonizing and saying like, no, your need isn't important. And so we do a lot of work early on in just helping people sort of rebuild that intimacy and begin to like look at each other as human beings again. Because a lot of times by the time they get to us, they're sitting on opposite side of the couches. They just see each other as almost the enemy, which is a horrible way to look at your partner.
Well, and I think when they come in, they're both suffering, and we all suffer very differently. And kind of at the end of their journey with us, it's like they have that compassion and empathy that although they're both suffering and it looks different, they both really want the same thing, and that's just to feel loved for all of them, for all of their imperfections, for everything. But that initial like sense of rejection or guardedness that we see, it's like you're kind of like bulldozing all of the guards that we've learned our whole life to build to not get hurt. And it's that one unique relationship in your life that kind of can trigger all of our stuff from early on, right? How do I protect myself against my dad's anger? Oh, I'm going to just like walk away. Well, then we learn how to do that when our partner starts to trigger us. And so it's just this very intricate dance we do with couples to help them soften and then get to that place where they can find that unconditional love for the two of them, however that looks. But again, like EJ said in the beginning, it's either this or we're done. That's like 80% of the couples, unfortunately, that come to us. And our kind of mission now is to like do more prevention work. Like, don't wait until a crisis happens.
That thrills me to no end. Again, I know it's always an ounce of prevention, and can't reach out to someone and make them come to you. People like you are often a last resort. People like me are often a last resort.
Absolutely.
People are only reaching out to you when they are in severe pain. And a big part of my work is trying to, I guess, one step ahead of where you guys are, is try to get people into relationships that are sound enough and have good enough communication that they're not going to require couples counseling. If you choose a healthy partner, you won't have to continue to work out your shit in your relationship. And I'm not saying that always works, but I agree with you that the sooner we could educate people about the purpose of your work, the better chance they have of having a happy relationship, whoever they're with.
Yeah, I just was listening to actually one of your podcasts in preparation. I love you were talking about moving on to the next relationship and finding the same person in a different body, or finding somebody that's like a polar opposite, and I think that's, I mean, really what you're speaking about there is how we make so many choices with a lack of intentionality. We just sort of stumble through life sort of reacting, really surviving, evolutionary psychology. Like, we just want to survive, we want to minimize our suffering and make a choice and move forward. And I think that, that preventative thing is really a lot about just understanding yourself more deeply, and understanding, that the pain that you grew up with and the negative core beliefs that you've developed. What we do when people come to us 10 years into their relationship, 15 years into their relationship, is we help them discover those things about themselves and each other really late in the process. And I think what we want to encourage, and it sounds like what you're working with as well, is getting to know those things before or during dating, so that you can be more transparent, so you can be more open about, Tarah was very open in our relationship very early on, of like, she was like, I am a high needs woman. Like, if you can't handle that, and it's true, it was true 15 years ago, and it's true today, when she was like, hey, I'm having a tough day. You got to be a teddy bear today. If you're a grizzly bear today, this ain't going to go good. Like, we're not going to have, and so thank God she let me know. And it still took me 15 years to figure out how to get better and better at it.
Well, this is a good misperception. A common misperception we see is that things can't change, that we're uniquely broken, that we can never get better. So there's really no hope, but we'll just try this one last ditch effort. And it's just it's so not true. Like, the beauty we've seen, whether it's in our own relationship. I mean, we started all of this because of our own relationship. And we were both licensed professional counselors. And I was like, what has happened? And I said, if we have like the tools and the knowledge, and I was divorcing him and moving to Kentucky. I was like, what's happened here? And so I said, I was compelled, like, we have to help others in our community globally now to like know that we're not uniquely broken. We just don't learn these skills. We don't learn this.
I'm so glad you used the word skill, because I do think dating, relationships, communication are a skill that we think we're sort of all innately supposed to have, but there's nothing else in the world where you think you can be good at it without learning it and practicing it.
Well, and then Evan, like, the idea like, oh, I have to learn a skill in order to make this relationship work. No, that's not how love is supposed to be. It's just like, oh, but go try it and see what happens. It's all about skills. And that's, accepting that and being open to that. Because it's like, you think about it. Where did we learn to really, if your partner is feeling emotionally disconnected, how is that going to impact physical intimacy? Did our parents talk to us about that?
Probably not.
No.
That would be an unusual family dinner time discussion.
Yeah.
Let's revisit this in 100 years and see what's happened. No.
Well, and then we have just experiential things in dating that also set us up for real problems later. And that just like, there's some wonderful brain chemistry things that happen at the beginning of a relationship that just aren't sustainable. Right. And if you experience that from when you're whatever, like 13, 14, 15 years old, of like, oh, it's like wonderful. And then you realize, oh, they kind of suck. Like, I'll break up with them and move to the next. It's like, I think people are constantly looking for the person who they're going to stay in that honeymoon period with like forever, or at least experience it frequently enough, which is also why people get into toxic relationships with trauma bonds where there's high ups and then high lows, is it feels sort of similar to that.
Yeah.
I think it's this unique combination of like just like brain chemistry things and things that are happening underneath the hood, and then socialization things of like just not being taught what a healthy, prolonged, intimately connected relationship looks like, and what you need to do to have that.
Yeah, so I'm so glad you led the conversation where you led it, because that's one of the things that where we have overlap, you and I, between what we do, because I'm trying to set people's expectations for the long run, right? And dating and relationships have almost barely anything to do with each other.
Yeah.
That honeymoon phase, that audition phase, the 18 to 36 months of brain chemistry that allow you to overlook someone's flaws. Eventually, people kind of come down to earth, and now we're in the attachment phase of relationships. And what
Yeah.
are we going to do for the next 40 years? It can't be sustained simply by great chemistry or stuff in common. There's tons of studies that illustrate how the idea that what people are attracted to at the beginning of the relationship has 0% to do with whether they're going to have a happy relationship, because the
Yeah.
happy relationship is far more based on what we're talking about here: sensitive to each other's needs, help out with housework and child rearing, turning towards someone's bid when they need you instead of turning away from the bid, all the Gottman stuff that you guys are
Yeah.
probably
Love the
well versed
bids.
in.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so I think you guys are really vital in helping that conversation. What is that thing, in concisely, because I want to hit all your most important talking points. What is that thing that people think at the beginning of the relationship should happen that shifts over the course of the relationship and becomes something else? How would you set people's expectations for the rest of their lives with someone that they fall in love with?
Well, I mean, I would say anything that has real like value is worth working on consistently. That anything that we want results, whatever metaphor you want to pick. If you look at a garden, you can't just sort of like prepare the garden, plant the seeds, and then just let it happen. Is that if this is something you value, and early on you're like, wow, this person is really a wonderful human being, and I love the way that I feel when I'm around them, and I have some connection that's worthy of cultivating, that then we're going to put work into it. I think that's our one of our real hallmarks of our program is like, we're going to help you find systems to cultivate connection, to rebuild it, to heal, and then sustain it. Is putting intentionality into it, and then creating systems that are going to help you continue that path.
I would say, so when you walk into our Tucson office, one of the first things you see is our partner can be our greatest teacher, be patient for the lessons. That relationships are not easy. I think there's an expectation that they should be. And that if you can kind of get to this place of, right, I love this person. This is a really difficult time right now. What's happening for me? How can I learn from this? How do we grow together? That's where all of my blind spots are open now. It's like we're each other's blind spots, but because our brain, right, is so, we want to black out, we don't want to suffer, we don't want to be uncomfortable. It keeps pushing our partner away, which then looks like, oh, we can't do this long term. And if you actually do a U-turn on it and say, what can I learn from this moment right now? And know that we're going to get through this, that is what leads to long-term, deeper, intimate connection, and that there's a freedom to it. And so this freedom of complexity, if you will, our brain thinks it's complex because it feels negative. And again, we want to avoid suffering. But once you can do that dance with each other and really stay vulnerable, it's this freedom that a lot of people don't experience, unfortunately.
I know I agree with you, and when you have a solid baseline for your relationship, disagreements are just things to get through and around. They're not the things that could collapse the relationship. At least that's the way I feel about my marriage. I'm not a professional couples counselor, so I have to speak with humility about how strong my marriage is. But we've never had an argument where it ever felt like it was threatening the very existence of the relationship. In fact, most of our arguments end very, very quickly when I say I'm sorry. So, to your original point, and people who listen to this podcast, you don't know me well, but people who listen to this podcast hear an almost opposite message from what you said. But I'm not gonna argue with you. It's like a relationship. I'm not gonna argue with you or make you wrong. I like the fact that you use the word complexity because I think there's two ways to look at relationships. One of them, which is to the angle that I think is the most commonly expressed, is yours. Relationships take work. Right? Like that's the going statement. Any parent will tell you, any couples counselor will tell you, any clergy will tell you, relationships take work. And I agree that it's more like EJ said, it's a garden that needs to be watered.
Yeah.
So I make the distinction, and it may or may not matter, between effort and work. Because bad relationships take a lot of work. And and everybody who's ever suffered through a 20-year marriage that should have ended in 3, right?
Yeah.
They were committed to the work and they didn't realize, oh, there are better relationships that aren't as much work. And so that's why I wanted to sort of plant a flag and ask, how do you feel about the idea that if you choose wisely, maybe it's more effort than work?
I think I like that differentiation because I think they sit in the same wheelhouse. You know, effort is like I'm willing to put in a consistent energy into achieving an outcome, right? I think the work comes in and some of it's, you know, colored through our you know own personal experiences but definitely through the people we've worked with is you know, like I'm thinking of a couple that we interviewed where, you know, he's a veteran, and his relationship exposed just how much suffering that he had inside him, and it was really, you know, and that's what's interesting about relationships is that it really exposes our deepest wounds, right? And our deepest wounds, you know, we don't want to, and our body and our mind actually have systems that keep us from looking at them, right? And so when you have like certain people and it's, you know, it's a huge segment of society, especially when you look at like, you know, women who have been a victim of sexual abuse and extremely high percentage of women who've dealt with that, is that we have so many people that have this internalized suffering that they've managed to tuck away and they've managed to just sort of survive and even thrive to a certain point. But then there's something about this intimate relationship that exposes it. And then when it gets exposed, it takes a certain amount of, and I think that's why we throw in the word work, of work to really go at it. Because it's nothing most people really want to do.
Emotional risks. I like that. I like that better.
Well, they're almost, our relationship forces us into it because it's like, well, if I don't look at that deep piece of suffering I have inside of myself that is clearly creating a major disruption between you and I, well, then it's an existential threat to this relationship. But I don't really want to do it. You know, and I think that's what makes it so complex for people is that they're like, they don't really want to do it, but they sort of have to do it. And so, I mean, I think that colors our sort of work versus effort, you know, mentality is we see
you know
people.
What? I think you're absolutely right for the nature of the work that you do. That is more going to the coal mines work, where mine is watering the garden work. What I'm trying to do is help people develop relationships that don't require
Yeah.
that deep excavation. For people who are already in it and they kind of have no choice
Yeah.
but to go through that together, then
Yeah.
perhaps that is a deep dive kind of work trying to heal those core wounds of your past. Um,
Yeah.
I think I'm trying to steer people into relationships that have just a higher baseline
Yeah.
that don't require that much maintenance. It's a house that's a fixer-upper versus
Sure.
new construction that you can move into.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I think some relationships actually do require that. I just
yeah.
if I had my druthers, I think that's a very challenging way to have to go through life for two people to have to fix things in order for it to work.
Yeah.
He'll not fix moving forward, but because I think we have a lot of couples too that come in that, hey, like we've been really good and we just forgot to prioritize our relationship, and we have them do like weekly check-ins,
Yeah.
daily check-ins. We have little feelings pillows on all of our sofas in our counseling center, and it's just like those little ideas of like always be curious about your partner.
Mhm.
Don't think that you know everything about them. Get to know each other again through a different type of lens, whether we work with a lot of trauma, but secure attachments, right, don't usually come into our door. It's usually a combination of insecure attachments together.
Mhm.
But I would say, regardless of insecure, secure attachment, if you're single and trying, it's about knowing yourself enough to know that it's a moving forward with intention every day when you're in a relationship and being curious about your partner. How is your day to day? Tell me something that felt really good. Tell me something that didn't feel so good. That constant curiosity is what keeps your brain going and the chemistry going. And so many times we see people don't check in with each other anymore. They get their chores done. They get the
Right.
kids to school. But they don't actually have that little, even if it's 5 minutes, check in with each other. And just that, Evan, like that has been like life changing for couples, just the checking in process.
I agree. I have a friend who just got engaged this week, and I was out with him last night and congratulating him, and just talking about the very thing that you talked about how once you become parents, the focus is on making money, making sure the kids are clothed and fed and get
Yeah.
to school and all that stuff. It becomes running a business and very organizational. And especially with the mom, especially if she's a stay-at-home mom, it becomes, 95% of her day. And there's a lot less oxygen for the
Yeah.
relationship. So the key is to figure out how you could keep the thing that you had alive prior to the kids, right? Make that
Yeah.
make that a priority in your relationship. And people talk about date night. My wife and I had a thing where we were never going to let our kids get in the way of our social life. We had a roster of babysitters,
I love that.
so that we can continue to thrive and have fun. And we were parents too, but it wasn't going to be the sole definition of our relationship.
Why do you think that was? I'm curious because there's so many couples who do the opposite, right? They don't have that instinct. Why did the two of you what was it about your upbringing, or what was it about, how did that happen?
I'm glad to answer the question, but this is where I'm supposed to interview you. I think
Save this for Friday.
because of my work, which is again adjacent to your work.
Yeah.
They say women are generally the emotional caretakers of relationships. In this relationship, I'm the emotional caretaker. And I grew up in a functional, secure background with parents who were married for 30 years, good but not great marriage. And I said, I want to be like my dad, but I want to do this better, this better, this better, this better.
Yeah.
And so this is one of the things I'm trying to do better that my dad didn't do when my mom was, primary caregiver. My dad was like, "Hey, I'm working hard for you," and he wouldn't take off a Friday, and he'd work until late p.m. and
Yeah.
he'd be home for dinner to tuck the kids in, and the kids loved him, but my mom always wanted him to be more present. So I said, "I'm not going to be that way."
You're not going to be that way. Yeah.
Yeah. So you
That,
either repeat the pattern or you go away from the pattern.
I love
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So anyway, back to you guys, because
Okay.
Sorry.
Yes.
I know this is your comfort zone, but I want you guys to be on the hot seat. So for our listeners, which are generally going to be single women, but not single forever. It's not the desired. I think about 20% of my listeners are in relationships and 80% are single. So what are the things that couples assume about each other that end up leading to conflict or an ability to connect? How are we looking past each other in general, and maybe even more specifically through anecdote?
You want to go or you want me to
Go
go?
ahead, and then
Okay, well, I mean,
I
I think that one of the big assumptions, especially, obviously heterosexual relationship, is that men only want to connect intimately through sex. I think that that's a big one, and
or that it's the most
or
important.
that it's the most important. And I think that that's a misconception that's born out of men oftentimes just not being as emotionally aware and not having a vocabulary to support opening up about what's going on inside of them.
Mhm.
And so I think it's like an important thing early on for a couple to begin to just become aware of how do we cultivate emotional connection. How do we notice, like, what are the discrepancies between the two of us and how fluid it is for us to open up about how the external world is affecting our internal selves. And so I think for men, a lot of times it's easier to connect physically, but that doesn't mean that they're not craving an emotional connection, but just don't necessarily, they haven't been a culture that way. They don't have the ability as easily as their female partners do.
Okay, I'm gonna say first of all, I love the idea that the woman is more of the emotional caretaker, right? Our bodies, our brains are built differently in the maternal sense, and oftentimes women become the overfunctioners in relationships, which
Yeah.
then lead to a ton of resentment and and burnt out nervous system, really. And then there's this idea that like they should just know what I need. Like I remember thinking EJ should just know this. He's had like two kids before we got together, right? We went into a blended family. And that assumption like knocked us off balance, off kilter because I thought he should just know. And why should I have to share what I need? This is just obvious. Mommy needs a massage. Call in someone, come to the, but that would never happen. And so it was this game. And when I got really good, Evan, at saying, hey, EJ, it would be really important today. Like I need an hour. I need to write, but women don't, I don't want to speak for all women. A lot of us don't know how to have needs, especially as new moms. We want to try to be super mom and do it all. And if I even look like I need something, I'm going to fail as a mom, plus all the stuff postpartum, right? And so I would say that assumption of like, they should just know what my needs are, get us into a whole source of just discombobulation, if you will, and that the better you are able to say, hey, this is important to me. Can we make this happen today? Whew, right? It took me a couple years to get there, but now I'm very good at saying what I need, and it's okay. And saying what I need is okay. It actually is it's a win-win. I can't intuit that EJ is going to intuit exactly what I need. So I know that's like long-winded
No,
answer,
that's
but
not long winded. It's important and it's very relevant. It, it and it I love when I talk to other people and who I respect who are experts in their field, and it validates some of the stuff that I have experienced and teach myself without any of your training. Just
right.
observing that if you're with a decent man, he wants to please you, he wants to be happy, he can't read your mind. Tell them
Yeah.
what you want. There's a good chance you're going to get it,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And it's direct and it's linear. If you tell them what you want, we could call it having boundaries, or it's like you tell your kids, use your words. Just express
Yes.
what you
Yeah.
want. There's like
Yeah.
the fact that you're upset upsets me. So how can we make that stop? What do you need? And it works almost every time.
Yeah. And even
I
if
know.
even if the need is something she's asking for that I might struggle, that is a little more abstract to me, I'll probably go out and try to figure out how to meet that need, or at least we can communicate about it. But if she never lets me know, then it's a mystery, and then all of a sudden I'm feeling resentment and anger, and I'm like, I have no idea what's going on. Like I don't know the way in which I'm letting you down.
It's one of the maybe you guys have a better way of addressing it. One of the things that I found ironic as a coach for women is I believe, from my experience, and the stereotype is that women are more sensitive, intuitive creatures in general than men. And yet I observe that they're more likely to ignore their own feelings for really long periods of time. Right? Men might be too reactive to their feelings. Women swallow their feelings. And again, I cannot tell you how many women I've spoken to who were in 25-year marriages that shouldn't have lasted more than the first 6 months they were dating. And they just got on a track and ignored the discomfort and not being seen and not being heard and not being validated and not being prioritized. And they normalize the behavior. So they associate relationships with neglect and pain and rejection, the very opposite of what a relationship should be. So does that resonate with you? And or am I missing the mark? It feels like women have a really high tolerance for discomfort in relationships to their own detriment.
I'm just going to parallel this with when I'm doing laundry, mine is the last to be put away. Sometimes it'll just stay on the table because everybody else's laundry is more important to put away than mine. Right? I mean, it's like I know when I met EJ, I said, I'm high maintenance emotionally, yet I always put everybody else's needs before mine. And I love that you just posed that question because I'm sitting here like, God, it's so true. Like, what about, I don't know if it's culture, I don't know, but that I could minimize my own needs for so long. And then it had to show up like this, right, in our first year of having our twins together. And of course, it led to this. But it's like, I would love to continue this conversation and processing actually around why that is so innate for me. I mean, I have a whole background of trauma and everything, so I can't speak for like, a non-trauma population, but it was so easy for me to just not take care of myself and make sure everybody else was okay, because if I did that when I was little, then we were safe.
Well, and I think the parallel with that, not just in our relationship, but what we've seen is like men tend to go out and get their needs met. They find ways. They're out. They're out golfing for 8 hours. To
avoid being with their family.
Yes, yeah. They will feed themselves first. And that's been a thing like with us that we've are constantly like, when I see Tarah like totally over functioning and doing it all, and I'm in the front like chilling, it's like, honey, like I didn't know you were in the back of the house, like frantically folding the laundry, Swiffering the floor, organizing my drawers for some reason.
If I had to explain it to you, it would just take too much time, so I did it myself. You're probably not going to do it right. You're not going to do it.
Or you might let me down. Like I think that's a big thing of like, well, I don't trust that anyone can do it the way I can do it.
Right. And then they take, right, and this is pretty common. They take that all. My wife, pretty sure she pulled an all-nighter last night. Why? We have 200 Christmas cards to go out, and that's her project. Yeah. Right. So then she's going to sleep in today and she's going to be cranky. I had to wake her to say, hey, did I get the questions for today's podcast? So there's all these downstream effects, and it's all because she didn't set the boundary to put her needs first. So maybe this goes back to masculine, feminine, not to stay stuck in gender stereotypes. But the best working definition that I hear is masculine is about self, me, my ideas, my ambitions. Feminine is about others, right? Mother Teresa, just putting everybody else's needs first. Don't worry about me. And I think if we go too far to either end of that spectrum, there's probably going to be some price to pay down the road that we didn't calculate.
Yeah. Which is why daily conversations around that, just that is so important, right? Exactly. It's just that always trying to be on the same page, no matter if you're going through a difficult transition, no matter if your day feels really good. Like, hey, is there anything you need from me today? Especially because a lot of women do have a hard time expressing their needs. But if I have a partner coming to me like, do you need anything? Like, what? It's okay. Actually, I want to be needed. That would be awesome. I actually feel empowered when you need me. Yes, honey, could you please go like empty the dishwasher? That would be great. Yeah. Just like those little things daily. And
well, and I'm thinking then back into the realm of dating, is how could you understand each other's backgrounds better earlier so you know what eventually you're going to face, because again, there's that honeymoon period of it just all being easy. But then, there's things that it took me a long time to learn about Tarah, and even though she would tell me things like, look, I started working when I was like 6 years old,
8 years old,
8 years old to get money to eat, and this whole idea that she always was working, and it wasn't just for her, it was for her brothers and sisters. And so that knowing that is a program for her, like I didn't have to do that when I was a kid. Right. And so it's going to be I could be a kid, and Tarah never could. And so, but I didn't really internalize it like I did as we, had been together longer and longer. And so couples having conversations early on about their upbringing and just what they learned and who supported them, didn't support them, and really looking at it through the lens of well, how does that affect us, in our budding relationship, could be super useful. And I don't think that happens very often.
I'll add on to that. I think that you're right through a couples counselor lens, that it would be constructive to be able to have those conversations. It'd also be somewhat unusual to put those kind of conversations first. So I think there's probably some pacing, right? Because people are willing to have intimate conversations. You can sit next to a stranger on an airplane and have an intimate conversation.
Yes.
I think in my dating brain, I would want to remove any agenda from it. So you could have an open conversation about hopes and dreams and fears and exes and parents. You could share all of it, but it is not to gather information to try to gotcha the person. Oh, I see where this is going. You come from a messed up family. You're not using that information against them. It's actually just a conversation the way we're having a conversation, coming from a place of curiosity. And then the accumulation of all that is really what's going to allow you to make better decisions. So you're coming from the place, EJ, of where most women actually do come from. I don't want to get hurt. I don't want to waste time. So tell me all your shit up front. And it doesn't work very well in dating.
Yeah. And it doesn't come from a soft, curious place.
The intention is right. I want to avoid getting hurt. I just think if my wife told me on the first date, hey, so I come from a family of alcoholics, and my dad left when I was 13, and he now lives in a different state, and he comes from a right-wing military family, kind of misogynistic. Subsequently, I've dated charismatic men, all of whom cheated on me. Check.
Check, please.
And again, certainly not to negate your point. Just
no, I hear you.
I think it would be a better world in which those conversations could take place that way.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's more about to me, when I work with a lot of single younger females who are terrified of it. They're like, you know what, I don't even need, if I'm just single forever, because there's that perception that there's so many fish in the pond, and it's why would I even want to be rejected? I'm just not even gonna go there. And why am I'm gonna parallel this to what I was gonna say, I swear. This is called perimenopause brain, Evan.
I'm familiar, and we're past that.
I'm in the thick of it, and it's awful. But what I was going to say, is this, the emotions piece. How do we deal with difficult emotions when they arise, just at an individual level? I say this, right, because I see my individual clients that I'm working with who don't want to date, and they're avoidance, right? Whether it's they grew up with a alcoholic parent or whatever. So now the perceived rejection they will get from the outside dating world continues to keep them avoidant within their own life, if you will. And so it's just that understanding that even at an individual level, looking at how we navigate difficult times because we learn from it, right? How did mom and dad, what did mom do when she was stressed? What did dad do? What do I do? Well, I don't want to be that way anymore because I do want to have a love and open up and find somebody that is like my jam, And so the work I do with my kind of single, more female 25 to 30-ish is incredible because I get to see them in this avoidance piece and they're not in a relationship.
Yeah.
And say, wow, don't you want to be the change agent now? Like, how do we free from this? And like, what emotions do you want to have? How do I support you in getting more vulnerable so that you can find that person and give yourself a chance? Like that emotion piece into it is which we miss out on because we avoid uncomfortable. Okay.
So people start in that new love phase, attraction, lust. Things change over time, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. How does that change for someone who's listening and has experienced this before, the hedonic adaptation of the new car is no longer the new car, it's just the car? How do people set expectations for what a relationship really looks like? How do you guys help people do that? Because I think, as you said at the top of the conversation, a lot of people sort of expect it to be 10 chemistry, 10 compatibility forever. And that's rarely how relationships play out. In fact, I don't know any relationship that's played out that way.
To me, it's always shared values. You're always finding your common values that you have in it together. And you're saying, every day, EJ and I plan, predict, prepare for what might happen today. We can't predict everything, but we really try to provide structure in our day so that we know that we can get through it together, that we are in, as Dr. Stan Tatkin would say, we're in this foxhole together. What is the best chance that we have of being a team, right? During something that might be really difficult, like our, medically, whatever it might be. How do we every single day try to plan on being together in this, approaching it in a way that our shared values are aligned with? And, it's just that team approach. Like that's what a long-term commitment is. We're working together as a team. It's not me, it's not you. We're 50-50 in this. Yeah. If you're happy, I'm happy, right? Like you said, if I say I'm sorry to my wife, it usually like we're okay then.
Yeah. And I think you said the word a little bit ago is curiosity. And I think, because we were talking earlier about those deep conversations and you were saying really what I wanted to come from is a place of curiosity, not information gathering. And I think that is what's really wonderful and unique early in relationship is that when you have those conversations, you're just curious. Like this person you're attracted to them, but you're also like, I just want to know like everything. Like you are freaking fascinating, and then we become numb to it. And I think you have to create systems to maintain that curiosity. Because the minute you think you know everything about the person is when you start just, they become a facsimile. They're not a person anymore.
I love what you just did because I had a question and you already answered my question before I asked it. What happens? Because and this might be my limiting belief. What happens when you have been with someone for a long time and you kind of feel like you do know everything about them? I mean, we could say, well, you're mistaken, but like, there's definitely. I remember 5 years into my marriage where we were on vacation together and we just ran out of stuff to talk about, and we pulled out our Kindles at breakfast and we're like, we're not talking about my work because we're on vacation. We're not talking about the kids because we're on vacation. I heard all of your stories. You've heard all of my stories. Okay, I guess we'll read our Kindles. So curiosity, great in theory. What does it mean when you've spent decades together?
Well, I mean, one thing it means is that there are certain processes, we'll get back to like sort of neurophysiology. There are certain processes that set you up for that, is that our brain conserves energy. And so it says like, hey, I know this, just like I know a door, I know a car, I know Tarah. It doesn't want to do a lot of work. And so you have to realize that you are sort of like fighting against some stuff that happens in your brain. And you have to, so then that's where creating, like, one of the things, we did a lot wrong in our relationship, but we did a few things really right. And those were that, like, even if we didn't go out on dates, we always pretty much, weekly was sat out in the backyard, had a glass of wine. We would get books that asked each other
The
questions.
book of ifs, the curiosity
Yeah, and
questions. Oh my
so
gosh.
maybe I can't think of like a question that might lead to me learning something new about Tara, but fuck, a
Listen,
book can,
no, that's actually really, really great. I think that the challenge is you guys look at the work you do. Of course you do that.
Yeah.
So for a regular couple you're seeing where the guy like doesn't even want to be in therapy at all, much less read a book with questions, right?
Yeah.
How do we get him to show some curiosity? Because even in the dating phase, women are like, this guy doesn't ask me any questions. I've been on 3 dates with him. He knows nothing about me. I know he thinks I'm attractive, but I've heard everything about him. He knows nothing about me. Or is that a sign, hey,
Oof.
don't date a guy who shows no curiosity about you. This is what the rest of your life looks like.
I mean, I think you gotta fall back on, you gotta say the truth in a kind way.
Clear as kind.
Yeah, and if you're realizing, whether you're dating or a few years into your relationship, and you're realizing, like, man, I really want my partner to be curious about me. I really want to have deeper conversations more consistently. And if you're realizing that, you got to find a kind way to tell the truth, because you're right. Like, that might be, if you find a kind way to tell your partner, like, look, it's really important to me that we spend weekly time getting to know each other better throughout our life, and or this month, whatever. And if the person just isn't willing,
Yeah.
and that doesn't really matter to them, well, shit, you're setting yourself up for a world of heartbreak and frustration and resentment.
So there's a thing that I see. We talked about earlier how women will go without getting their needs met. It's a wonderful quote. You're only as needy as your unmet needs. So women tend to suffer in relationships with unmet needs. And I'm a coach for women, so I tend to focus on that, even though there's certainly a parallel for men.
Hmm.
One of the things that I've noticed is, and it may be universal, but women really want their men to change and evolve with them to become the man they want them to be instead of seeing him for who he is. And again, I'm usually encouraged before marriage, I'm encouraged with people breaking up a lot sooner rather than
Mhm.
marrying someone and hope they live up to the potential you see them to have. How do you feel about that theory? Because again, I maybe I'm looking for validation, but I'm more likely to tell women to break up with men than to marry them hoping they become who they think he should be.
I, well, I think this because we have a lot of this in our practice. Like, oh, I just need him to be more emotionally available. And once he's emotionally available, then we can have this relationship. Or I thought he was going to be more emotional available and he said he was all these things. And if you're trying to change someone, and so I knew EJ, right? When we first met, I knew all of his, like, I didn't know all of his stuff, but like I knew where he had difficult times and where he felt rigid, but he knew that about himself. So we were willing to grow together because I said, look, I'm noticing this. Here's what I'm needing. EJ would say, I'm noticing this. Here's what I'm needing. I'm like, okay, that's going to be really hard for me because I am like a control person. I'm like type A. I like everything to be done. But I was like, I'm willing to work with you around that if you're willing to support me. And EJ, right? Avoidant type, holy moly, right? But he was willing to say, hey, tell me when you see that, because I seriously, truly don't know that's happening. Just his willingness to say that meant everything. Did it take 10 plus years for him to work through his avoidant stuff? Yes. But
That's an amazing example.
did I love him and knew that he was even like, yeah, I didn't give up on him. And so I get it. There's the people that they're not supposed to be together. But I think both of us in our own way, like we are always willing to do our own work and use each other's love and the respect we had for each other to trust, like he's trying to actually help me and she's trying to help me. They're not trying to say I'm not enough right now, but they're seeing something that I can't or feeling something that I can't. And so it was just this, I don't know, Evan, it was like a patience thing for me, but also EJ's willingness to be like, no, totally. And if this dating thing, right? I'm thinking about so many clients I've had who are single who are like exactly what you said. Like I'm on this date and they're sharing. They don't ask me one question. And I'm like, okay, even if you did make a second date, which why did you do that? And B, if you did, like, hey, it would be really important for me to share about myself too. Let me know when that works for you. So you're still not over functioning, but you're giving them that opportunity. And so you're right, you're clear as kind, words of Brene Brown, unclear as unkind. The clearer you can get, that's just freedom for both of you. Because I don't want to set EJ up to fail. I don't think he wants to set me up to fail. But a lot of couples unconsciously do that. Yeah.
I mean, I see dating as a selection process, right? And I think what you're trying to do is really help people be mindful about that selection process. And I think you also you have to know what you want, and you certainly don't want to get into a relationship with a person who just is not willing or unable to go to a place that you need them to be. And if you're
I
getting,
believe you shouldn't have to drag him there. It doesn't mean that he's a bad person because he doesn't want
no,
what you want. I think that's what
Exactly.
I see as women who just hold on to these guys and try to drag
Yeah.
them into commitment, drag them into communication,
No.
and invest a whole bunch of time and energy on someone who's pretty much shown them in action
Yeah.
and word this is what they want. All I want is
Yeah.
a long distance relationship where you fly to me once a month and I can text you. I don't actually want the whole integrated life. And he won't say that out loud because then she'll leave. So he just gives her enough so she could stick around and hope that by sheer force of will, he will love her enough to change his tune on everything. And I see those as a lot of dead end relationships. And her version of it is, Evan, relationships take work.
I I love that. Gosh, this could be like a whole second podcast because it's the idea of overfunctioning. It's what I help my individual clients and couples that come in because trust me, Evan, we don't just take any couple. There's a whole consultation process. Both people have got to have some kind of skin in the game, if you will, because otherwise then the therapist is overfunctioning in that room. Like I'm not going to be working harder than you guys. I see that this is where you're at. And so that very feeling of first, like identifying it, a lot of people don't even know what that means. Overfunctioning, it's like when my nervous system, like I start to feel like it's all on me and I'm just going to wait and right, I'm going to prioritize like this person's needs over mine. And people feel it differently. It could be a word, it could be a feeling. Mine is like, I get it in my head. It's like a bowling ball. You've got to look at that and be like, that will take me nowhere good. Like, so identifying the feeling of overfunctioning, whether it's in a beginning relationship or whether it's in a relationship where it's been happening for 30 years, like if you continue to do that in this way, this won't work.
Yeah. Well, and if you ask any of our therapists at our center, what's the most difficult thing to work with a couple? They'll tell you ambivalence. If there's one person who's just like, I don't think I want to do that, or I don't think I'm really committed in the way you're committed. That's a game stopper because it's like, well then, okay, what do we do? And then you're right. Then one person is shouldering all of the burden. They're dragging them forward, or they're not dragging. They're just pulling, And so, you need two people that the same things are important. Because if one thing just isn't important, no, emotional connection, not important to me. I just want to make a bunch of money and have sex and go on vacations together. That might be what that person needs. And there's probably another person out there that's, because we've seen so many people, there's another person who probably wants similar things. So I agree with you, man. You cannot, and this is the words of Tarah, you cannot work harder than the other person because it's just, you can help them, you can support them. But if they're just no, that's just not important to me, or or they're just saying that through their actions, what's the point, you know?
Um, you were right. We could keep on going down this road, but I want to be conscious of time. My clients are smart, strong, successful women who have everything but the man, right? So it's a certain type. Is there anything that you see when you get that woman who is the type A that pointed advice to her in relationships, something she could apply immediately just from listening to this podcast?
Okay, so this is sometimes type A, very powerful, empowered, successful women. If there's insecurity in men, right, that a lot of men actually like that. They see this independent, brilliant, solid, confident woman, like that's like a good thing. But if women in that way are trying to manage the relationship the way they manage business work, it's always doomed. And we say, okay, we know that you're super successful in this area, and managing, your employees, your staff, your company like this, like really works for you. And so you're getting all of this positive feedback. And when you're trying to do that in relationship, and I'm thinking of just like the people that I've worked with who are in dating relationships, that control piece, that's not going to work because this is a different type of relationship. And so it's like helping them with their work identity versus how they are in a vulnerable, intimate relationship. And there's a softening to it because usually high-powered, successful women, right, have this energy to them, and then how to soften that into the dating world with someone that might feel like it could be a good fit for them.
I mean,
You might have a totally different.
no, I love that. I love the whole idea of separating your work self from like your personal self, like, and finding those two people. I just know a lot of times individuals like this are probably coming out of bad relationships,
Right.
and I think that it's easy coming out of those relationships to have a lot of barriers that you've put up to protect yourself because oftentimes you've been hurt in those relationships. And I think it's important to reflect on that and take space between moving forward too quickly and looking at like, how have all of these past relationships, how have they led to me creating walls between myself and meeting that person who I'm really meant to be with? And so, because you don't want to go into the next relationship with your guards up from the last relationship. So I think working with somebody like yourself, where they can really reflect back and look at like, look, I've shut myself off to really even believing there can be that person, that we can have that app sort of like running in the background and not even know that it's up. And so my thing is just like, look at how your past relationships are creating the obstacles, and heal from that, and then get out there, and open yourself up to a relationship again, because you just don't want to be affected by, you don't want to be affected by unconscious habits that you're taking from 10 prior relationships.
Yeah, I think that's almost inevitable, or sort of the sum total of our experiences. The question is, do we learn from them, or do we either repeat the patterns or then overcorrect, right? Not me, but I'm in a relationship for 20 years and the sex stops, and the next thing I'm looking for is chemistry. And I'm in a relationship where I'm making all the money and I have to support the guy. Now I'm looking for money. And so then you find the guy who's got the money, but he ends up lacking other things, but at least I got my money. So this is one of the things that, I get to see from the dating realm, because I get them after. If you guys tried to save them as a couple, they couldn't be saved. They end up with me saying, how do I fix my picker? I don't even trust my judgment anymore.
Yeah, I don't even trust me because too, like their whole right. When I think of somebody that's type A, very successful, it's like that is their driving force in life, and that a relationship should feel like home to them, like something calming and safe where they can like the busyness of their day and like they can come home and be like, this doesn't have to feel like work. Okay, now I'm really getting the differentiation piece, work and effort, but that you still have that person that's willing to like connect with you emotionally and physically, but it has a very different sense of what it feels like than in their work environment. So yeah, sorry, that just connected. Yeah. Thank you, Evan.
I'm just kind of, again, I think it's really important. And you guys are, fluent in this, but that we talk about feelings and we honor feelings. The feelings I always talk about on my little podcast are feeling safe, heard, and understood. If a woman's in a relationship and she doesn't feel consistently safe, heard, and understood, it does not matter how great your relationship is on paper or the great times you had in the first year you were together.
Yep.
It's the consistent feeling and that's probably just another shorthand for what you're trying to get people to.
Oh, that's like 100% it. And back to like the difference between men and women is I think when women say, I don't feel safe, men are just like confused by that. They don't understand it. And so helping a woman really be able to clarify that and be more concrete and this is what it means when I say I don't feel safe. In our relation, unsafe is when I'm emotionally gone. When I'm not totally present,
And your eyes are darting.
I've learned that's when Tara, and she used to say unsafe, and I'd be like, what are you talking about? I don't even yell. Like, I don't even raise my voice. And so it was so confusing. And it was just this arc of growth for me of like, oh, unsafe means not present.
Safe, heard.
I think it's really insightful what you said, because men will be like, you're safe with me. I'm here to protect you. I would never touch you. Like what part of this is unsafe? And I think it's the safety to express yourself in full and know there's going to be no recriminations, that you could take all of the messy things going on inside of me and not use that against me.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that you said that, Evan. Only because too, like so many people at the beginning of couples therapy, like if I say this, I know that he or she will use this against me. And so I'm not going to say anything at all. Like they're using this as a threat now, like weaponizing vulnerability. And it just gives you this huge sign of like the lack of safety that's in that it is so important. We do emotional safety questionnaires at the beginning, middle, and end. And if it's not like at least 4+ on there, we're like, okay, what's still happening? Where are you not feeling understood? I love all the 3 things you said, but where are you not feeling seen? Where are you not feeling understood? Where are you not feeling safe? But they're still willing to work on it. And it's work over a lifetime, but you're with your person and you're loved for all of it. And like you said, there's no threat of, breakup with a little argument. That's awesome. Because you're going to have these arguments and you're going to get closer because of them, and you're going to learn how to work them out quicker, and you're going to learn how to say I'm sorry, and oh my God, what just happened? I noticed that you just shut down. Was I just a jerk right there? Like, help me understand that. So yeah, safety is really important.
Yeah.
And everyone deserves, if anything, if any of your listeners can get anything, it's like everyone deserves to love and be loved in a way that feels good for them and safe. And to not have to overfunction. And you don't have to be in a relationship where if you're doing that, how is that even helping the other person? We're keeping it stale. Like if I'm working harder than my clients, I don't trust that they can actually do the work then. So now I think people get caught up in that. Like, well, if I don't do this, then it won't get done right. Well, then that's on my bad too, because I'm not trusting that this other person has the capacity to do so. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but I've got to let go and see if they're capable and be honest.
You guys are wonderful. I want to close, and I guess it's cheesy, but I don't mind being cheesy. I'm a dating coach. When you're in your work and you've been doing your work for X number of years, you have your sayings, your aphorisms, your little shorthand things. What's your one great takeaway for a smart, strong, successful woman who wants to literally have one thing to write down from today's conversation out of everything? For that target audience, college educated, six-figure earning women,
Mm-hmm.
right? What's your best nugget for them? Each of you give one. And again, I know it doesn't begin to encompass what you do, but
I mean, I'm going to stick where we were at the end of what does it mean? What does it look like to be seen, heard, and understood by a partner? Is really taking that out of the abstract. Like, how can I tell if a partner is seeing me? What can they do to make me feel heard? Can they do to make me feel understood? Because then if you identify those things, and then early on in the dating process, does it seem like this person has some innate ability to do those things? Because I think we want to, like, with our partner, and I think this is why we've worked, we've been willing to help each other refine aspects of ourselves, but it hasn't been a total rebuild. You know, Tarah had the qualities. I hope I had the qualities that made her feel seen, heard, and understood. I've just gotten better at it.
okay.
Oh my gosh, there's so much here, Evan. Okay. So, but the first, like, my gut thing is just that, like, I deserve to be cared for as well. Like, I'm right. There's so much that they do for other people, for their business, whatever they're doing in their life, that, like, I deserve to also be cared for as well.
Love that. And
Yeah.
again, it hits me somewhere really close because it's a thing that I say often. You're
Oh,
taking care of your clients, your husband, your kids, your right. Who is your elderly parents? Who's taking care of you?
yeah.
And a lot of women don't have a good answer to that question and break down in tears when they think about how much energy they're putting out for other people and how little they're receiving in return.
And their whole, and the majority of their day, they're getting the feedback from them taking care of others. And so, oh gosh, if I need to be taken care of, there's just this fear that it won't happen. And so we just close ourselves up to that feeling of it. But when you can really get into that part of it, it's, oh yeah, I do. And I'm going to find that person for me. And I'm going to use my gut instinct, which I know is awesome because I'm a rock star out in my life. I'm going to use that in my intimate dating relationships as well. Gut instinct, go with it.
Awesome. Listen to your feelings. Say EJ and Tarah Kerwin. Guys, where can everybody find you? I've got your YouTube and Instagram. You want to share it with everybody here?
Sure. I mean, I think the easiest thing is just, Google Relationship Renovation. We got our podcast out there. It's on every major platform. Our website has links to everything, to our YouTube, to our Instagram, all of those channels. So
Yeah, just relationshiprenovation.com.
Yep, that's the easiest way to get us.
Yeah, and if you guys want to take advantage of their wisdom, they've made it accessible to you. If you go to relationshiprenovation.com/online program, we'll put that in the show notes so you'll be able to hopefully access it with one click. But that is Relationship Renovation at-Home Program, and you can find that directly on their website. EJ, Tarah, thank you so much for joining me on the Love You podcast. If you guys enjoyed this podcast, not you guys, but you guys listening, if you enjoyed this podcast, make sure you like, subscribe, leave us a positive review, all those things that people do. Tell a friend about what you learned here today. And till next week, I thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you.